Well, folks, this week I am still sans glasses, but as we roll through the Invasion storyline 20 years later, you don't need good eyesight to know that this week's show is a big improvement from Unforgiven. I'm talking about No Mercy 2001 from October 21st at the Savvis Center, now the Enterprise Center, in St. Louis, Missouri. This show was nominated by Thomas Fireheart and Mike Ryan over at patreon.com/wrestlingwithregret. Well, don't get too comfortable with Kurt Angle as your WWF champion, because even though he won in Pittsburgh last month with a feel-good moment of America getting a win after the tragedy of 9/11, those vibes are soon dashed because, as I mentioned in the Unforgiven review, Austin was given an out when he had a rope break while he tapped out. So 2 weeks later on Raw, Austin was given a rematch for the championship. Commissioner Willie Reeves turned on Kurt and allowed Austin to regain the title. Regal became the Alliance Commissioner, but meddlesome Linda McMahon, she steps in and appoints Mick Foley to regain his position as WWF Commissioner. Just what we need in this angle. More authority figures. Let's talk about the opening hype package here, where it really focuses on the triple threat main event for tonight. You know, Austin's facial expressions here, they're no Unforgiven 2001, but what we see here is also pretty stellar. My favorite part of this package, though, is when Angle's posing with the championship looking all happy, then he's like, whoa, wait, what happened to it? 15,647 in the arena, 325,000 pay-per-view buys. It is down considerably from the 550,000 they had the year before. Jim Ross and Paul Heyman on commentary. Your opening matches for the WCW tag titles as the Hardy Boys defend their belts against Lance Storm and the Hurricane. The Hardys did win the belts a couple of weeks ago, beating Booker T and Test for it, who beat the Undertaker and Kane for it like 1 or 2 weeks before that. Like I said, the titles have bounced around a lot during the storyline. Lance Storm was accompanied by Ivory around this time, who I feel was really wasted in this storyline. And honestly, all the women were in the company because, you know, the women's championship was essentially defunct with Chyna being out of the picture, and the women had nothing to fight for, really. You had some ladies from the Federation jump ship to the Alliance for no other reason than, well, the group needs more than Deborah as the sole female in this group. So they added Terry, they added Ivory, and they added somebody else here who I'll get to in a minute. But, you know, Ivory being one of the most talented, you know, all-around workers in the women's division at this time, having nothing to do, it's like this whole part of her career is really not talked about by WWE. Like, even her Hall of Fame package when she was inducted, it pretty much ends at, well, and she was the women's champion with right to censor in 2001. But, like, the whole rest of her year is kind of a forgotten memory, and honestly, the rest of her career by WWE too, because she was with the company until like 2005. And who's the other lady who's joined the Alliance? Why, only the Hurricane's new sidekick, Mighty Molly. A week or two ago, Molly Holly was knocked out in a match. The Hurricane basically abducted her and drove off in the Hurricycle. Then she was presumably brainwashed and became Mighty Molly. No, sir, nothing to unpack with that angle. JR and Heyman bring up the history between the Hurricane and the Hardys, as they were Omega Boys together, so it's really cool to see that come full circle here. At one point, the Hurricane puts on his cape, but he's knocked down, but trusty sidekick Mighty Molly helps him up, which allows him to fly onto his opponents outside. Jeff's worked over for several minutes. You got 4 wrestlers in the ring, 3 more outside, a lot to keep your eyes on in this matchup. Jeff kicks Hurricane away, and we get the hot tag to Matt. Matt and Hurricane work well here. Matt with a big leg drop, takes a double super kick, but Jeff makes the save. Lita intercepts Molly in the ring. Ivory gets involved. She gets hers. Lance goes to the Maple Leaf, but Lita with the Hurricane Rana off the top. A twist of fate by Matt. The Swanton by Jeff. The win. I give this one 3.5 stars out of 5. It was a really good opener, and honestly, the last 30 seconds of this match was what really made it for me. Just the constant bam, bam, bam. Like, everyone was getting their stuff in, and the crowd was totally alive for all of it. You know, and you can't really go wrong with this combination of workers. The Hardy Boys work well with just about anybody. Same with the Hurricane, same with Lance Storm. This is very good stuff. Newly evil Commissioner Regal sees Rob Van Dam backstage, and he asks him if he's going to apologize to Stone Cold for hitting him with the frog splash this past Friday on SmackDown. Warns him not to do anything stupid tonight, and RVD says, okay. Elsewhere, Mr. McMahon is back, and Michael Cole helps him with his coat. Vince says he's here to make an impact one way or another, then wraps up by telling Cole not to drop his jacket again. Makes me wonder if the jacket drop was intentional or not, because if it was an accident, then it was a good ad-lib by Vince, but if not, makes me think it was intentional just so Vince could have an opportunity to act tough on somebody. Up next, Alliance member Test takes on the Big Red Machine, Kane. Early on, Kane power slams Test, then press slams him, just dumps him out of the ring. Holy crap. Test belly pelts Kane with the ring bell. Apparently, Alliance referee Nick Patrick does not see it, even though it's like right in front of him. Kane's boot begins to fall apart as they both lay into each other. Test the big flying elbow off the second rope, a big side slam, goes to the top rope elbow but misses. More back and forth, more slammage. Back on the outside, Kane is shoved into the ring post and takes a big boot. Kane ducking another boot in the ring, hits a choke slam, but he's too beat up to capitalize. Kane goes for a flying clothesline, he misses. Test with a pump handle slam, but Kane kicks out. Test brings in a chair, Kane drop kicks it into Test's face. Patrick gets involved once again, Kane's had enough, but Test takes Kane to Dick Kick City, another big boot. Test with the win, but Kane gets a measure of revenge when he chokeslams Patrick twice in a row, then fucking murders him with a powerbomb, then does the pyro at the end. I give it 4 stars out of 5. I love this Hoss fight here. It's funny because I consider myself like a lifelong Kane fan, but I really couldn't tell you a whole lot of matches of his, like besides against the Undertaker, that would be considered iconic, but I would put this match on that list. These two just beat the hell out of each other. I think it was a good pace, told a good story. I think it's easily one of their better matches for both guys, honestly, and that Nick Patrick beatdown at the end, the cherry on top, just makes the whole package great. So yeah, real hidden gem this match. I recommend you go watch it. Backstage, the coach wants to interview Stone Cold Steve Austin. Austin wants none of it, but he just shouts at Deborah, who relays the info, so basically you're getting the same promo delivered twice. Elsewhere, the Keibs is backstage, and she walks up to Matt Hardy going, "What do you think of my lingerie, Matt?" Matt's like, "Well, it's no leg shaving, but it'll have to do." Matt's in a trance when his girlfriend Lita shows up and snaps him out of it. Ooh, wonder what's going through Matt's head right now. Then we go to what's in their words, the first ever lingerie match, and they make a big deal the precedent set with this matchup here, folks, as Stacy Keibler takes on Torrie Wilson. These two are technically both members of the Alliance here, but ever since Torrie began dating Tajiri on the WWF side, now the Alliance wants nothing to do with her. They give her the cold shoulder. Stacy aligned herself with the Dudley boys to get Torrie powerbombed through a table. This match's promo package definitely oversells this matchup here, considering who's involved and what the stakes are here. It had to have been done, ironically, on purpose, though. Go watch it and let me know what you think. We got the pretty canopy over the ring for this one, folks. We get some cartwheels early on, a dramatic reveal by Stacy, and she gets out a little whip and gets to whipping. We get some stereotypical women's spots at the time, the old steamroller bit with the referee. Then out of nowhere, we get a series of pins and counter pins, which definitely caught the crowd by surprise. Torrie ends up winning with a springboard back elbow, just like her boyfriend Tajiri. I give it 1 star out of 5. You know, the match was better than I expected, which is why I gave it that rating. You know, it was a stereotypical kind of a cat fight style match between two ladies who can't really work, but they did pull off a couple athletic moves here and there, and I think, you know, they did the best they could. That's really all you can ask for. And one little side note I want to say here before I go on, because I get these kind of comments, and every time I review a shit women's match during this time period, they go, "Oh, is Brian gay or something because he doesn't like these pretty ladies?" Duh. No, I rag on these shit matches because I'm a grown-ass man. I like professional wrestling, and I don't need the women necessarily to titillate me when I'm watching a wrestling show. And so I kind of compare it to the other matches going on there. Like, it's a great flex for you if you can pop a boner watching a Stacy Keibler match, but you know what? Couldn't be me. Backstage, Kurt Third Wheel Angle cuts a promo about the title match he is definitely not winning tonight. When Mr. McMahon shows up to say hello and to wish him luck, Angle tells Vince he's going to win the title. It's true. Oh, hell yeah, it's true. It's Van Dam true. Blah. Elsewhere, Christian talks about how when he and Edge were a tag team, everyone talked about how great Edge was, but Christian was always better. He compares Edge to Mark McGuire and how McGuire's home run record was broken by a better man, and also the Cardinals lost last week. The people of St. Louis are not pleased with these local sports references. Then we go to the ladder match for the Intercontinental Championship as Christian defends against his brother Edge. Last month at Unforgiven, Christian sneakily beat his brother for his first IC title. The ante has been upped considerably in the following weeks as Edge has been out for blood. Then finally, Edge falls victim to a Christian trap because Edge finds out just after a match that his mother was apparently in an accident. He goes and tells Christian this news, and the two of them are going to go off together. Suddenly, the Alliance boys stop Edge and Christian, but then Christian hits Edge from behind. It was a setup. It's a beatdown by the Alliance goons and Christian. Then Christian says there was an accident all these years ago when Mom gave birth to you. Christian then joins the Alliance after the big setup on Edge, which to me feels like the most pointless defection in this entire storyline. It will get beaten a little bit down the line, but right now, Christian joining makes no sense because he is a perfectly fine heel as it is, and not to mention his whole reasons for turning heel has nothing to do with the invasion, has everything to do with his beef with his brother. But I guess the rule here is if you're a heel, you gotta be on Team Alliance. So now we have this ladder match, which is perfect because these two were the masters of the tag team ladder match in TLC and so forth, so it's full circle. The fighting begins right away as the belt is raised. They brawl into the crowd and Edge hucks Christian into a wall, a backdrop over the barricade, then a catapult into the ladder. Man, Christian Christian bumps his ass off early on. Ladder bridge on the outside. Christian gets crotched on the rung. Holy shit, that looked snug, because he was still several inches above the floor when he stopped. Christian uses the ladder to uppercut Edge and start to take over. Pins Edge into the corner with the ladder, grabs a chair, sets up a somewhat convoluted idea for a chair shot, but Edge catches him and throws him onto the ladder. Edge setting up another ladder in the corner, but it backfires. Christian with the catapult into it. Both men are up a ladder. Edge takes Christian down with a super Edge-o-matic. Moments later, Christian with a super reverse DDT. Christian goes to set up the one-man concerto, but Edge just shoves the chair to Christian's face. Edge sets up Christian on a table made of chairs and a ladder. JR says, "What in the name of brotherhood?" which is an awesome phrase, by the way. Big splash by Edge. Edge climbs up top. Christian just jabs Edge with another ladder. He goes up top, but Edge takes him out with a big-ass spear. They fight up top again. Then they both fall off and land on the floor. A holy shit chant from the crowd. Christian back up. Edge just stabs him in the taint with a chair. Good God, poor Christian's crotch. Edge gets him on top of the ladder, sets him up for a one-man concerto. Holy hell, the sound of that smack. Christian slumps to the mat and Edge grabs the belt to become the Intercontinental Champion once again. I give it 5 stars out of 5. It is my pick for match of the night, and it's a terrific ladder match too. And it's a great way to, if this is not the blow off to their feud, then it's a great peak of the feud. Just the story they told here and the way they just beat the hell out of each other, even more so than in Unforgiven, which was a pretty physical match, but these two just went balls to the wall for this one, and I truly appreciate the effort that they gave in this thing. That finish with the one-man concerto on the ladders, it was creative, it was different, it was sickening, the sound that was made for it, and yeah, it was the great cap-off, the great comeuppance for Christian after everything he had done. So a great match, again, like Test and Kane, but more so for this one. Go back and watch this match because it's phenomenal. Over at WWF New York, Spike Dudley's pounding him back. I hope he gets an employee discount. Paul Heyman asks him about being dumped by Molly Holly. Then a pretty lady walks up to him and he's all like, "Molly who? Oh, Spike, you scamp." WWF tag titles up next as the Dudley Boyz defend against Big Show and Tajiri. This pairing does feel a bit thrown together, and it is, but they did give you a bit of a storyline reason for them coming together, because the Dudleys took out Spike a couple of weeks ago. That was Big Show's partner at the time. And then the Dudleys also powerbombed Torrie Wilson through a table and made Tajiri watch. So they both do have individual beefs with the Dudleys at this point. Why they're tag team title contenders? Who knows? Tajiri and Big Show work well together early on, Show using his strength, Tajiri with a big somersault plancha to the outside. Bubba hits his bomb on Tajiri and the Dudleys begin to take over. We get the hot tag fake out with Big Show, Tajiri with a big DDT, and that leads to the hot tag. Show's a house of fire. Show does the Scott Hall dance for some reason before he signals for the chokeslam, then he's cut off. Tajiri's misses the mark and he hits the referee instead. Show with the chokeslam on Bubba, but the ref is still out of commission. Then Rhino shows up and hits Show with the gore. Tajiri with the buzzsaw kick and the ref recovers. We get a 2 count. 3D to Tajiri. The Dudleys retain. I give it 3 stars out of 5. The match was solid. It was entertaining, but I am getting kind of tired of the interference we're seeing in all these matches. Not all these matches, but 3 out of the last 5 matches we've seen have had some kind of fuckery, some interference going on to cause the finish. And so it's getting kind of old. Backstage, Willie Reeves congratulates Rhino for his actions in that last match. Rhino says he's going to change the way people look at the Alliance, even if he has to do it by himself. Elsewhere, we see Shane McMahon, Booker T, and Test hanging out. Test is very happy that he beat Kane, and Booker says tonight the Undertaker will be one dead sucker. And now we go to the other half of that Brothers of Destruction, Booker T and Test feud, as the Booker Man takes on the Undertaker. Booker did call his shot. He beat Taker in a tag team match with some assistance on SmackDown a week ago, and he's called the Undertaker for a match here. The match begins in a brawl on the outside. Booker T is on top for a couple of minutes, then Taker gets some time on the offensive himself, works over Booker's arm, hits the old school. It is called that by now. Booker comes back fighting on the outside. Booker goes to the bell, but Tim White puts a stop to it, and Taker fights back. Fighting in the crowd now. Back at ringside, Booker throws Taker into the ring post. It's a nice missile dropkick off the top and gets a 2 count. Booker goes for a flying nothing. Taker stops it. More back and forth. Booker keeps kicking out. He drops Taker onto the turnbuckle, hits the side kick. Spin-a-rooney time, and JR goes, "What's so electrifying about that?" Another kick. Taker with a rope break in the cover. Booker with a corner punches, but he gets caught in the last ride. The last ride, and wins the match. I give it 2.5 stars out of 5. The match was okay. I think Booker T proved himself to be a worthy adversary for Undertaker here, and this match is just miles ahead of what we saw last month with the Undertaker and Kane versus Chronic, but this did drag a little bit in my opinion, and probably my pick for the most boring match of the night. Chris Jericho is backstage and says it's time to put up or shut the hell up. Time to go win the big one. And we go to our semi-main event now for the WCW Championship. That's the WCW Championship as The Rock defends against Chris Jericho. So the whole storyline with this has been Jericho has been standing up to The Rock and kind of showing his backbone, showing his spine a bit against the Great One. The two were in a tag team match and Jericho accidentally hit The Rock with a chair. Rock scolds him for it. Jericho stands up for himself and takes it to The Rock backstage. Jericho talks about the one knock against him as he can't win the big one, can't win a world championship, but he has earned a shot after beating Rob Van Dam on SmackDown. The Rock and Jericho with a fierce war of words here. Rock tells Jericho he simply isn't good enough to win the big one. Jericho, one of his most defiant acts of the time, putting his hand on The Rock's face, doing the just bring it taunt just before getting rock bottomed. As they lock up to begin the match, JR talks about the history of the WCW title and talks about the Black Scorpion situation, which what? Nobody talks about the Black Scorpion situation. Why would you bring the Black Scorpion now of all times, Jim? And then after an arm drag early on, Jim Ross screams, "Shades of Ricky Steamboat!" Yes, a guy with a WCW title hits an okay arm drag and you immediately invoke Ricky Steamboat here. Come on now. Jericho's out-wrestled for a bit until he just slaps The Rock in the face and begins to take over. Rock and Jericho trade finisher attempts but each get out of them. Jericho with a triangle dropkick to Rock off the apron. Look at that top rope move. That's a top rope Judas effect, years before its time. The two exchange chops, Jericho with a quick heel kick. Jericho goes up top, but Rock stops him, hits a superplex. Jericho with a rock bottom and a lion salt, and there's a kick out. Even goes for his own people's elbow, but misses. Rock with a dragon screw that looks really painful, then cinches in his terrible sharpshooter, but we get a rope break. They make their way to the outside again, a rock bottom on the Spanish announce table. Back in the ring, spine on the pine. The people's elbow, though, countered into the walls of Jericho. Very cool. Suddenly, Stephanie McMahon shows up with a chair. Jericho chases Steph off the apron and almost costs him. She gets back on the apron and she gets a rock bottom for her efforts. The referee is distracted. Jericho with a full Nelson slam onto the chair. Jericho pins and wins and is the new WCW champion. Jericho has finally won the big one, officially winning his first world title. The Rock stops Jericho's celebration, chair in hand, gives it to Jericho and says something to him and walks off. Jericho isn't a full-fledged heel yet, but boy, he's on his way to it. I give it 4 stars out of 5. I forgot how much of an epic this match was, how long this went, how they really explored the space with this one. But it was great drama, great tension in this thing. I complained earlier about a lot of the interference we saw on this show tonight. This one, at least with Stephanie, I'm going to be a bit more lenient on because at least it did kind of play more into the story they were trying to tell as far as protecting The Rock from the loss, but also helping kind of get the ball rolling on Jericho's inevitable heel turn. But it's a really cool moment for Jericho here because slightly tainted win or not, he still kind of did it on his own without Stephanie's direct involvement. And, it was, the crowd loved it. The announcers treated it like a big deal. Him winning his first world title was a really big deal. And as someone who was a fan of his then, I think it was a great moment. You kind of knew where it was going to go, but still very validating for Jericho to finally get this big one. After in 2000, when he won the title for a night and they had to give it up and it was off the record books, this one, the mulligan, it feels right. Then in our main event, a no DQ triple threat match for the WWF title as Steve Austin defends against Rob Van Dam of the Alliance and Kurt Angle. So as I mentioned at the top of this review, Commissioner William Regal left the WWF and joined and took the same job with the Alliance. Regal's reasoning for this was he felt that the Alliance was the more dominant, more up-and-coming brand or organization with the better upside. Yeah, a conglomeration of 2 dead feds who have failed to win practically any meaningful match so far in this angle. That's the real up-and-coming brand. New commish Mick Foley set up the triple threat match for the championship involving Rob Van Dam, assuming he chooses to take part in it. And as I've established, there is a bit of a rift between Austin and RVD. Stone Cold feels very uncomfortable with Rob Van Dam and his place of prominence in the Alliance, how people look up to him. He feels he's being kind of ignored and cast aside in favor of Rob Van Dam. A few weeks of will he or won't he here as Austin tries to butter RVD up and get him to not challenge for the title. But on the go-home SmackDown, RVD was spotted having a meeting in a limo with the returning Mr. McMahon, who we had not seen since the invasion. On that same episode, RVD has a choice of who to frog splash. He hits Austin instead of Angle. And that moment right there is pretty emblematic of the storyline as a whole right now because poor Kurt Angle, like I mentioned, is a big old wobbly third wheel in this matchup. He has nothing to do with the main crux of the storyline, which is about Rob Van Dam and Stone Cold Steve Austin. Kurt is there, but I feel that ever since he lost the belt on Raw to Steve Austin, he's just been kind of floating in the ether and just so not a focus on this thing. And it's it sucks because, like, think of all the time the company spent in building Angle up and getting him to be more legitimate and less goofy in that time between, like, the King of the Ring and SummerSlam, and how they built him up as, like, the next babyface to fight Steve Austin after he defected to the Alliance. And so that great match at SummerSlam happened. They had the rematch at Unforgiven, and he basically won the championship because of 9/11, and then he dropped it right away. And it's just like, what? It's sad to think about the alternate timeline where Angle could have possibly never won a championship during this run. Like, he only won that out of what happened in this national tragedy, and to think all the work they would have done to build Kurt up in this thing, only to have him lose all his encounters with Stone Cold, like in the different timeline, that would have been super disappointing. Be that as it may, Angle gets things started in the match with a bevy of suplexes. Austin and Van Dam are a bit shy to hit each other at first, but within a couple of minutes, though, Austin's swinging everything that moves. Austin goes for the stunner, but Angle blocks the kick, and Austin yells, RVD with a rolling thunder on Angle. Austin begins to work on RVD's leg, but Kurt Angle keeps interrupting, trying to remind everyone he's still in this title picture. What's the most popular move on this show? The catapult. We get another one in this match from Austin to Angle. Steve and Kurt fighting on the outside, then RVD flips onto both of them. Angle actually hits his moonsault on RVD. Nice. A double down by Austin and Angle. Rob goes for the splash on one or both of them, but they both move. A lot of broken up pinfalls here. On the outside, Austin goes for a pile driver on the announce table, but Angle counters it, but then Van Dam dives onto him. Everyone is down. Then Mr. McMahon has entered the chat. Van Dam and Angle trade attacks. Kurt with a big suplex off the top rope. Austin with a stunner. Kurt rolls out of the ring. Steve stalks Rob, but then Mr. McMahon whomps Austin with a chair, cuts him open hard way on the back of his head. Ouch. RVD hits the 5-star frog splash, but Kurt breaks up the pin. Angle with many suplexes in the Angle slam. Then Shane McMahon gets involved. Vince charges into Shane and they brawl. Austin with a stunner to RVD. The cover and the win. Austin retains. I give this one 3.5 stars out of 5. I think this triple threat match is a lot better than the one we saw at King of the Ring with Jericho and Benoit. That was good, but this one I think is better, a bit faster pace, told a better story. My one gripe with this match was the involvement of Vince and Shane McMahon, because that really hammered home that this storyline isn't about the championship. It's not even about the Federation versus the Alliance. It's all about Vince versus his children. And that's really all it boils down to. And with Vince coming back, that really was hammered home on this show, I think. Now, whereas Stephanie McMahon's involvement in the previous match, I think, elevated the story told in that match, I think Vince and Shane getting involved in this one brought it down a little bit, because again, it just took away from the other more interesting story of the dynamic between Austin and Rob Van Dam. And speaking of which, I think one of the biggest mistakes they made in the whole Alliance storyline, the Invasion storyline, was that they didn't pull the trigger on Rob. I'm not saying he should have won the championship on this night, or that he should have won the title like on this thing, but at the very least, he should have defected from the Alliance. I mean, the whole Invasion storyline, their biggest wow moments the entire run was having someone from the Federation jump ship to the Alliance, and it was so rarely, if ever, done the other way around. Maybe Torrie Wilson going to the Federation under dating Tajiri, but think of how awesome a moment that would have been for the Invasion storyline, which by this point is hanging on by a thread, to have one of the biggest stars just jump ship to the Federation where he's feeling more appreciated and having to get away from the tyrannical reign of Steve Austin. Like, that whole thing writes itself, but kind of like how they screwed the pooch with Angle, they did the same thing with RVD in the storyline. My grade for No Mercy 2001 is a B. Like I mentioned at the top of this video, I think it's a big improvement from Unforgiven the previous month, but also it's very obvious by this point that WWF isn't even caring about the Invasion aspect of their product anymore. Like, of all the people who wrestled tonight, 6 of them were actually from the WCW acquisition or the ECW Invasion just before the Invasion pay-per-view. And of those 6, 2 of them were technically on the same side. So yeah, not a lot of investment into the actual, like, invading talent instead of the people that are already there in the company to begin with. But that being said, a lot of the matches were really good. Like Test versus Kane was an unexpected delight. Edge and Christian, the ladder match, was fantastic. Unfortunately, they shit the bed with RVD, like I mentioned. But, you know, that being aside, I think this was a very good show in the right direction. We got one more real month of this thing before the climax of the Invasion storyline. But before that, in 2 weeks, we're going to go back in time, way back to the year 1989, when a young WCW wants to try and spook and frighten the fans with Halloween Havoc. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.